Some marriages are made in heaven, others at the business end of a shotgun. In 104 years Aston Martin has enjoyed all manner of nuptials and it is currently walking out with Mercedes-Benz, chaperoned by Chief Executive Andy Palmer. The dowry is a small share held by the German giant in one of Britain's oldest and most exclusive car makers, and in return Mercedes gives Aston exclusive access to its electronic architectures and power units. The V8 engine db11 is one of the first results. It's not unreasonable for buyers to expect their sports coupes with a pure bloodstock line including a thoroughbred in-house engine. If you expect the same, stop reading here, for this car is more bizarrini than Ferrari GTO. It might resemble the V12 engine db11 launched to some acclaim last year, but under the bonnet is what the Americans term a crate engine, untouched in all but the smallest detail, an oil sump and a Bosch engine management from the Mercedes-M unit fitted into virtually everything made by the company. Admittedly, this is a pretty special crate, a 4.0-litre, 503 bhp 513 pounds-feet twin-turbo 90-degree V8, production-based but hand-built by one skilled engineer per engine. There's irony upon irony here. Aston Martin, which has long since dropped its tradition of such individual artisanship in its engine shop, now finds itself joined at the hip to a tuning subsidiary that Aston Mercedes subsidiary AMG used to build its own very special 6.3-litre racy-derived engine, but eventually bowed to market pressure and emissions regulations and adopted a production 5.5-litre Mercedes V8 block, and more lately a 4.0-litre unit. Little has changed to the external design of the db11 Credit Max area. Ironically, as demand for V8 engines has dropped, AMG now finds itself as the custodian of all Mercedes V8 engine development. Even more ironic is that while Aston's V12 is exclusive to the marque, it's also production-based, in this case on a couple of Ford Mondeo V6 units in tandem. What's more, Mercedes' getaway car division and its engines are all gurgling bombast and Sturm und Drang, where Aston's more traditionally have a refined, high-revving aristocracy. To try to make this unit more Aston, they've altered the silencing, but not the other determinates of an engine's character: camshaft duration and timing and the crankpin inclination. This is an interesting move for Aston Martin Credit Max Aries to start her up via a big crystal button in the middle of the dash, and there's a thuggish, booming quality to the engine's note, like an AMG inner sock. It's certainly willing, though, with its twin single-scrolled turbos nestled in the 90-degree V between the cylinder blocks. This hot turbo arrangement was first seen on Ferrari's Formula One engines, with the turbos so close to the cylinder head. There's a big reduction in turbo lag, great thermal efficiency, and it is easier to fit under the bonnet. The V8 doesn't exactly look lost in the engine bay, but let's just say that there's enough space to make this the mechanic's friend. And it's a lot lighter, too. At 1,730 kilograms, there's 115 kilograms less in the nose, while the V12's 51% front, 49% rear weight distribution is reversed to 49 front, 51 rear. The propeller shaft spins at engine speed all the way back to the ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox, just like the V12. Things Aston didn't buy were the dry sump version of the AMG engine, as it wouldn't have offered any significant advantages, and AMG's dual-clutch gearbox, which would have fitted but would have meant a lot more engineering work. It's not hard to imagine what this car sounds like: Credit Max Aries, and that's about it. Except it's isn't, of course. When the db11 was launched, there were a number of less than glowing reports about its handling, its barreling quality over crests, its lack of side-to-side stability and general waywardness. Aston's chief dynamics engineer Matt Becker admitted that the car was perhaps less than optimally set up and has been working on it since, most of which consisted of retuning the rear suspension. If you think it's the front, it's the rear, and if you think it's the rear, it's the rear, he says, imparting setup lore gained from his years honing cars at Lotus. Don't go thinking the new engine is in any way a pussycat. It might trade a couple of cylinders, 1.2 litres and almost 100 bhp compared with a V12, but the torque figures are about the same. The 187 miles per hour top speed is only 13 miles per hour less, and the 4.0 sec 062 mph acceleration is just 0.1 sec slower. This is still a formidably fast car, and every inch a package marked handle with care, particularly on the sodden roads of the Spanish launch. It's very easy to become a hooligan at the wheel of one of these Credit Max Aries. The gearbox suits the engine and changes with speed and precision, but not the sharpness of a dual-clutch unit. There wasn't much wrong with the fixed steering wheel paddles on the V12, but these have been reworked to give a more immediate feel. The interior marks a fine line between the ostentation of a Bentley Continental and the austerity of a Mercedes GT. Its seats are things of great beauty and very comfortable, although the high instrument panel makes the car feel less wieldy than it is, and you spend a lot of time sitting upright to peer down the seemingly endless bonnet. Nor is the fascia the simplest and most logical thing to use, particularly the heater controls. It looks good, and the instrument binnacle and huge buttons ranged across the top of the center console are terrific, but the screen control capstan is a straight lift from a Mercedes-Benz and the touchpad is a bit useless. This is ultimately a two-seater Credit Max Airy. The rear seats are ridiculous, as is right and proper for a 12 Plus 2 GT, and the boot will carry a couple of modest bags. Rain also defined the launch of the V12 engine db11, so there was at least consistency. The V8 rides equally well and combines a decent amount of wheel movement without rolling through turns. The turn into corners feels more immediate, but never darting, and the rear of the car feels more settled and confidence-inspiring. It will still wag its tail, slide out on corners and get quite wayward under hard acceleration, but the stability feels more positive. Noting picture of the day, the 27th of September 2017. It's not perfect, and at times the suspension had a strange pushing quality at medium speeds, but slithering around the roads of Girona I had a great deal more confidence in what the car was about to do compared with the V12. It could have done with a slightly more responsive brake pedal, but the anchors are strong and progressive. Despite the soundtrack and the nature of the power delivery, I never felt this car was anything less than an Aston Martin and, in handling terms, a better one than the V12. Aston says it will fit the revamped suspension to all db11s from now on, although that begs the question of what the 2,500 folk who have already stumped up for a db11 V12 do. We aren't convinced by this color. Credit Max Airy. Talking of using your customers as test beds, our car had a howling passenger side door seal, a whining differential and a rattle somewhere near the offside B-pillar. The engine had a suspected misfire and the gearbox had a weird fault, which meant it would NTU accelerate in 8th gear. Small volume makers such as Aston have a problem preparing enough pre-production cars for events like this, and of course the production cars won't suffer these sorts of problems. Or at least Aston says they won't. At £144,900 it's no cheapskate alternative to the V12, which costs £157,900. It's easy to mistake a big improvement in an Aston Martin as being on the pace against the competition, and at these prices the spectres of the Porsche 911 Turbo and Audi R8 are never far away, but I rather like the V8, not least for its much improved handling, but also for the power unit, which is fun and brave-hearted. The acclaimed Aston Martin DB11 now comes in V8 form, but is it any good? Credit Max Airy tested 3,983cc twin-turbo V8, 8-speed, automatic gearbox, rear-wheel drive PRICEON sale from £144,900 now. First deliveries in November. POWERTORQUE 503 bhp at 6,000 revolutions per minute, £513 feet at 2,000 revolutions per minute, top speed 187 miles per hour, acceleration 062 mph in 4.0 sec, fuel economy 28.5 mpg EU combined, on test 19 mpg, CO2 emissions 230 gkmv, ED £1,700, then £140 plus £310 luxury tax for 5 years, then £140 verdict. Despite the use of an engine shipped in from AMG, this new version of the DB11 is a genuinely great car to drive. It rides well, looks wonderful and is powerful and charismatic. Some will still want the extra cylinders and cachet of the V12, but this is every inch an Aston. Telegraph rating 4 stars out of 5. The rivals Mercedes-Benz AMG GTR, from £143,260. The AMG GT starts at just under £100,000, but for the moment, this R is the apogee of the range. It's brutish to look at, but faster, lighter, and accelerates harder than the Aston. But it's also a bit of a handful, especially with the rear-wheel steering. The standard car is better and less scary. Click here for our full GTR review. Audi R8, from £123,350, a rare thing, a practical and less than terrifying mid-engine supercar. The R8 is an elephant in the room here, and that's not just Aston Martin. Its chassis balance and composure defies belief together, as does its long-distance ability. Its naturally aspirated V10 and twin-clutch gearbox are terrific. Click here for our full R8 review. Porsche 911 Turbo S, from £147,540. Stuttgart's evergreen rival is Dingbats fast, and with its super expensive variable geometry turbochargers, the 572 bhp 553 pounds-feet 3.8-litre flat-six is more flexible. Yes, a Porsche turbo is a bit of cliché, but there's a reason for that. Click here for our full 911 Turbo S review. For tips and advice, visit our advice section, or sign up to our newsletter here, AZ Car Finder.